Let's talk about trust. We all know trust is fundamental, but when it comes to trusting people, something profound is happening. Please raise your hand if you have ever been a host or a guest on Airbnb. Wow, that's a lot of you. Who owns Bitcoin? Still a lot of you, okay. And please raise your hand if you've ever used Tinder to help you find a mate. This one's really hard to count because you're kind of going like this. So these are all examples of how technology is creating new mechanisms that are enabling us to trust unknown people, companies, and ideas. And yet, at the same time, trust in institutions, banks, governments, and even churches is collapsing. So what's happening here, and who do you trust? Let's start in France with a platform, with a company, I should say, with a rather funny-sounding name, BlaBlaCar. It's a platform that matches drivers and passengers who want to share long-distance journeys together. The average ride taken is 320 kilometers, so it's a good idea to choose your fellow travelers wisely. Social profiles and reviews help people make a choice. You can see if someone's a smoker, you can see what kind of music they like, you can see if they're going to bring their dog along for the ride. But it turns out that the key social identifier is how much you're going to talk in the car. Blah, not a lot. Blah, blah, you want a nice bit of chit-chat. And blah, 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 you're not going to stop talking the entire way from London to Paris. It's remarkable, right, that this idea works at all, because it's counter to the lesson most of us were taught as a child. Never get in a car with a stranger. And yet, BlaBlaCar transports more than 4 million people every single month. To put that in context, that's more passengers than the Eurostar or JetBlue Airlines carry. BlaBlaCar is a beautiful illustration of how technology is enabling millions of people across the world to take a trust leap. A trust leap happens when we take the risk to do something new or different to the way that we've always done it. Let's try to visualize this together. Okay, I want you to close your eyes. There is a man staring at me with his eyes wide open. I'm on this big red circle I can see, okay, so close your eyes. I'll do it with you. And I want you to imagine there exists a gap between you and something unknown. That unknown can be someone you've just met. It can be a place you've never been to. It can be something you've never tried before. You got it? Okay, you can open your eyes now. For you to leap from a place of certainty, to take a chance on that someone or something unknown, you need a force to pull you over the gap. And that remarkable force is trust. Trust is an elusive concept, and yet we depend on it for our lives to function. I trust my children when they say they're going to turn the lights out at night. I trusted the pilot who flew me here to keep me safe. It's a word we use a lot, without always thinking about what it really means and how it works in different contexts of our lives. There are, in fact, hundreds of definitions of trust, and most can be reduced to some kind of risk assessment of how likely it is that things will go right. But I don't like this definition of trust, because it makes trust sound rational and predictable. And it doesn't really get to the human essence of what it enables us to do and how it empowers us to connect with other people. So I define trust a little differently. I define trust as a confident relationship to the unknown. Now, when you view trust through this lens, it starts to explain why it has a unique capacity to enable us to cope with uncertainty, to place our faith in strangers, to keep moving forward. Human beings are remarkable at taking trust leaps. Do you remember the first time you put your credit card details into a website? That's a trust leap. I distinctly remember telling my dad that I wanted to buy a navy blue second-hand Peugeot on eBay. And he rightfully pointed out that the seller's name was Invisible Wizard, and that this probably was not such a good idea. So my work, my research focuses on how technology is transforming the social glue of society, trust between people. And it's a fascinating area to study because there's still so much we do not know. For instance, do men and women trust differently in digital environments? Does the way we build trust face-to-face translate online? Does trust transfer? So if you trust finding a mate on Tinder, are you more likely to trust finding a ride on BlaBlaCar? But from studying hundreds of networks and marketplaces, there is a common pattern that people follow, and I call it climbing the trust stack. Let me use BlaBlaCar as an example to bring it to life. On the first level, you have to trust the idea. So you have to trust that the idea of ride-sharing is safe and worth trying. The second level is about having confidence in the platform, that BlaBlaCar will help you if something goes wrong. And the third level is about using little bits of information to decide whether the other person is trustworthy. Now, the first time we climb the trust stack, it feels weird, even risky. But we get to a point where these ideas seem totally normal. Our behaviors transform often relatively quickly. In other words, trust enables change and innovation. So an idea that intrigued me, and I'd like you to consider, is whether we can better understand major waves of disruption and change in individuals and society through the lens of trust. Well, it turns out that trust has only evolved in 3 significant chapters throughout the course of human history: local, institutional, and what we're now entering, distributed. So for a long time, trust, until the mid-1800s, trust was built around tight-knit relationships. So say I lived in a village with the first 5 rows of this audience, and we all knew one another. And say I wanted to borrow money, the man who had his eyes wide open, he might lend it to me, and if I didn't pay him back, you'd all know I was dodgy. I would get a bad reputation, and you would refuse to do business with me in the future. Trust was mostly local, and accountability